So just a long strike. 1-2 to STAUB. 2 out. Mets trail by 2. Ball well hit to right center field. This ball's got a chance. Out of here. Home run. Rusty STAUB. The Mets lead 3-2.
I'm baby.
Enjoy this great game.
Over 20,000 people have put on a uniform in order to participate as a baseball player in a Major League Baseball game. Most of them played a few games at the highest level, but never put together a long and successful career. And then there are a select few others who went on to become absolute superstars with names that are instantly recognizable to nearly any baseball fan. Then somewhere in the middle is a group of players who did excel at the game for a long period of time, while helping their team win games like few others could, but for whatever reason, they never got the credit that they deserved. These are players who were snubbed for awards and all-star games. They were oftentimes as good or even better than the big stars, but their names never received that type of recognition. You probably won't find any of these guys on the cover of a baseball video game, but they were all outstanding players who deserved much more recognition than they received. These are my top 25 underrated MLB players of the modern era. There are also dozens of underrated players from the early days of baseball, such as Art Fletcher and Ross Barnes, but I will save them for another video. This list will include players who made their debuts after 1950. Keep in mind that this is not a ranking from worst player to best player. It is a ranking that compares how good the player was to how much appreciation they have received in terms of awards, all-star selections, Hall of Fame support, and hype with the fans. With that said, let's get into it. Number 25, Bobby Bonds. Bobby Bonds was one of the greatest power speed combo players in the history of the game and is one of just 8 players in the 300 club. That's 300 career homers and 300 career steals. Although he did strike out a lot, he could also work a walk and retired with a .355 on-base percentage. He hit 30 home runs and stole 30 bases in a season 5 times and is the only player to do it in each league. He also played elite defense, but spent many years in the shadow of the great Willie Mays. Bonds made only 3 All-Star games and receives even less credit for his great career now because of his son Barry, who was even better. Number 24, Steve Finley. As a San Francisco Giants fan, when I think of Steve Finley, I think of the 2004 walk-off grand slam to clinch the division for the Dodgers, and the 2006 season when he had a very mediocre year at best for the Giants. In other words, I don't have many fond memories of this man, but along with Bobby Bonds, who I just talked about, he is one of only 8 players to have 300 home runs and 300 steals all time. And also Willie Mays, Barry Bonds, A-Rod, Carlos Beltran, Andre Dawson, and Reggie Sanders. During the late 90s and early 2000s, he was an absolute machine, crushing home runs and stealing bases while playing elite defense. He retired with over 2,500 hits and 300 home runs, yet made only 2 All-Star teams and received 0.7% of the vote on the Hall of Fame ballot. Number 23, Doug DECINCES. A lot of current baseball fans have likely never even heard of Doug DECINCES, but for about a decade he was a reliable power hitter for the Orioles and Angels. In 1982, he finished 3rd for the MVP after smashing 30 home runs with 97 RBIs and a .301 average, but was left off the All-Star team. He also hit one of the most dramatic home runs in Baltimore Oriole history in 1982, officially kicking off Oriole Magic. DECINCES only made 1 All-Star team, and although he certainly did not have a Hall of Fame career, he did come close to 250 home runs and had a much better career than most fans remember. Number 22, Ron Fairly. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to Ron Fairly call Giants games on the radio in the late 80s and early 90s, but looking at his playing career, he may have even been a better player than broadcaster. Fairly played for 21 years and did just about everything, no pun intended, fairly well. He worked walks, he kept a decent batting average, he hit about 13 to 19 homers a year while playing excellent defense. And in the 1965 World Series, he hit .379 with 2 homers and 6 RBIs, helping the Dodgers win it all. In his career, he had 1,913 hits and over 1,000 walks with 215 home runs and 3 World Series rings. Unfortunately, he made just 2 All-Star teams and for most fans, his name doesn't really jump off the page. Number 21, Frank White. Another player who might be remembered more for his broadcasting career than his playing career, Frank White had an incredible glove and could fly on the base paths while swinging a solid bat. He did win 8 Gold Gloves and made 5 All-Star teams, but has received little Hall of Fame support and feels underappreciated. By the mid-'80s, White had developed some pop as well, crushing 22 home runs in back-to-back seasons, and was also clutch in the big moments, winning the 1980 ALCS MVP, smashing a homer in the '85 World Series, and even hitting a deciding home run in the '86 All-Star Game. He received just 3.8% of the vote in his only year on the Hall of Fame ballot. Number 20, Steve Rogers. Although he did make 5 All-Star teams, Steve Rogers is a name largely forgotten since his retirement after 1985, possibly due to a relatively short 13-year career and a mediocre 158 and 152 record. However, many of those losses came in stellar starts where Rogers received almost no run support as a pitcher for the Expos in the mid-'70s. For example, in 1976, he went 7-17, leading the league in losses despite a solid 3.21 ERA. His team had the lowest batting average, fewest hits, and fewest runs in the league. When the offense did improve as the 1980s approached, his record improved, and in 1982 he went 19-8 with a league-leading 2.4 ERA and would have won the Cy Young if not for the incredible 23-win season by Steve Carlton. Rogers has the most wins in Montreal Expos history, and catcher Gary Carter once said that he has the best stuff he'd ever seen. Number 19, Kenny Lofton. Lofton comes in somewhat low on this list because he was a popular player. He made 6 All-Star teams and won 4 Gold Gloves, but he only received 3.2% of the vote on the Hall of Fame ballot, falling off in his first year despite having over 2,400 hits and 600 steals. On the JAWS ranking for center fielders, which measures Hall of Fame worthiness, Lofton is 10th all-time and ranks above several Hall of Famers. He simply helped his team win ball games by getting on base and wreaking havoc on the base paths while playing elite defense for 17 years. Even in his final MLB season in 2007, he hit .296 with 23 steals and a .367 on-base percentage. His career on base of .372 is better than George Brett and Paul Molitor, yet he never really gets credit for how good he was. Number 18, Jose Cardenal. A member of the Chicago Cubs Hall of Fame, Jose Cardenal collected over 1,900 hits, 300 steals, and hit over .290 in 6 separate seasons. Yet he never won a single award or made a single All-Star team. In 1973, he was hitting .318 with 104 hits and 53 RBIs at the break, but was not selected to the All-Star team. He tied with Pete Rose with a .317 batting average in 1975, but was snubbed that year as well. Although he was a fan favorite in Chicago, Cardenal was never really recognized for how good he was, possibly because he was overhyped as the next Willie Mays after hitting .312 with 36 bombs with the Giants AA team in 1963. He never really worked out in San Francisco, but still went on to have a great career, and although he may not be Hall of Fame worthy, Cardenal was a lot better than he gets credit for. Number 17, Brian Giles. During the late 90s and early 2000s, when Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds, and others were putting up video game numbers, another player was quietly smashing well over 30 home runs every year with an average over 300. His name was Brian Giles, and from 99 to 2002, he averaged 37 home runs per year. He also knew how to work walks and routinely had an on-base percentage well above 400. If a player had that 4-year stretch today, he would become one of the game's biggest superstars. Instead, Giles went practically unnoticed. In 1999, for instance, he smashed 39 home runs with a .315 average and 115 RBIs. There are many seasons in which that would make him a front runner for the MVP, but in '99, he finished 19th. An even crazier fact is that Mark McGwire smashed 65 homers that year and finished 5th. Giles played for 15 years and retired with a .400 on-base percentage and 287 home runs, yet he made just 2 All-Star teams. Number 16, Tim Salmon. There was no way I could leave the biggest All-Star snub in MLB history off this underrated list. Tim Salmon was a name known by most MLB fans, and he did carry some star power, but somehow never made an All-Star team. Salmon was a Rookie of the Year who had a 14-year career, which included 5 30-plus home run seasons and 8 separate seasons with a batting average over 280. In 1995, he hit .330 with 34 homers and 105 RBIs. His .884 OPS puts him in excellent company, and he is surrounded by Hall of Famers on the all-time list. The only reason he is this low on the underrated list is because I believe the general baseball fandom appreciated his worth, and he is an all-time Angels legend. But since he was never given the chance to shine at the Midsummer Classic, I have to include him on this list. Number 15, Jimmy Wynn. During the 60s and 70s, there were few players who could steal bases, hit for power, and get on base like Jimmy Wynn, the toy cannon. He brought a ton of power to his 5'10" frame and smashed 291 career home runs, including 37 in 1967, and one of the most famous tape measure shots of all time with this bomb that he sent out of Crosley Field onto the freeway. However, he could also work a walk like no one else and held the MLB record for walks in a season until Barry Bonds came along. He set that record in 1969 and also smashed 33 home runs, but was left off the All-Star team. His career 55.7 WAR puts him above Hank Greenberg, David Ortiz, and Fred McGriff. Yet on the Hall of Fame ballot, Jimmy Wynn unbelievably received 0 votes. As the voters usually do, they simply looked at the name and left his box unchecked instead of doing the slightest bit of research. Number 14, Bobby Grich. When comparing Grich to other second basemen, he appears to be one of the greatest of all time and gets nowhere close to that type of respect. On the Jaws list for second baseman, he comes in at number 8, above Hall of Famers Ryne Sandberg, Jackie Robinson, and Craig Biggio. How is that possible? 2 reasons. His ability to work a walk and his elite defense. Although he did have power, Grich only hit more than 20 home runs twice, which prevented him from entering into superstardom. However, he worked at least 75 walks 9 times in his career and retired with a .371 on-base percentage. On defense, he was probably the best in the game for at least a 5-year period, and if you believe Jeff Kent should be in the Hall, Bobby Grich is deserving as well, as he had an even better OPS plus and was definitely better defensively. Grich had a 71 career WAR compared to Kent's 55. While I believe both should be in the Hall of Fame, Kent seems to get much more support. Therefore, Grich makes today's list as one of the most underrated players in the modern era. Number 13, Graig Nettles. While the outspoken and charismatic Reggie Jackson got most of the credit for being the power hitter of the late 1970s New York Yankees teams, the quiet and unassuming Graig Nettles was also smashing quite a few homers of his own while playing elite defense. In fact, he led the league with 32 bombs in 1976, and without him, the Yankees likely would not have made it to 3 World Series in the late 70s and early 80s, especially in 81, when Nettles hit 500 in the ALCS, taking home MVP honors. He hit at least 20 home runs 11 times during his 22-year big league career. As a big fan of underappreciated players like Nettles, even I was shocked to see that he finished his career just 10 home runs short of 400. He fell off the Hall of Fame ballot after receiving less than 5% of the vote. Number 12, Carlos Delgado. Coming up next is another massive power hitter completely swallowed by the steroid era. It's easy to forget just how good Delgado was. He came just 27 home runs short of the magic 500. In the year 2000, he somehow smashed 57 home runs with a .334 batting average and 1,134 OPS, yet finished 4th for the MVP. Somehow he made only 2 All-Star teams during his career. And in 1998, he had 17 homers with a .308 average at the break and was left off the All-Star roster. Despite the lack of All-Star appearances, Delgado had a clear-cut Hall of Fame career in my opinion, yet received a mere 3.8% of the vote, due partially to the ridiculous 10-player maximum that the writers are allowed to vote for. This rule means by definition, if 11 deserving players happen to be eligible for the ballot during the same year, as a voter you are forced to leave one off. Even today, Delgado doesn't get much Hall of Fame support and is one of the most underrated players of all time. Number 11, Tommy HERR. Up next is a player who has never received full appreciation for his abilities, even going back to the draft when his name was never called. He ended up signing as an undrafted free agent with the Cardinals and became one of their most consistent players. His best season came in 1985 when he drove in 110 runs with a .302 average. He also stole 31 bases, being thrown out just 3 times. HERR retired with the best fielding percentage in the history of Major League Baseball for second baseman, yet he never won a single Gold Glove. He retired with over 1,400 hits, a .347 on-base percentage, and just 1 All-Star selection. Number 10, Bobby Abreu. Another player better than most remember is Bobby Abreu, who may have not had the appearance of a superstar, but he did all the little things right and some big things as well, as he smashed 288 career home runs, including 31 in 2001. Other than the long ball, Abreu compiled 2,470 hits and 1,476 walks. He had an incredibly impressive career .395 on-base percentage, which is better than many Hall of Famers, including Honus Wagner and Vlad Guerrero. The closer Abreu's career is studied, the more he looks like he belongs in the Hall of Fame. He could do it all, including steal bases, which he did 400 times in his career. He also played elite defense despite winning just 1 Gold Glove. Abreu was underappreciated during his career, making just 2 All-Star teams, and so far has been underappreciated on the Hall of Fame ballot, receiving just 15.4% of the vote in 2023. Although, to be fair, voters from 15 years ago likely would have not voted for someone like Abreu at all. Number 9, Rusty Staub. Although he made 6 All-Star teams, Rusty Staub still makes the top 10, as he has never gotten the appreciation he deserves, except perhaps in Montreal and New York, where he was a fan favorite. Staub was one of the hardest working players of all time, and despite not being the most naturally talented player, he learned to work the count like few others, get on base consistently, and help his team win games. He even developed power, which came along during his 7th year in the big leagues when he smashed 29 home runs in 1969 and then 30 in 1970. Although he crushed 292 career bombs, his most impressive number might be the sheer number of times that he reached base in his career, an insane 4,050 times, more than even Tony Gwynn. Despite this incredible career, he fell off the Hall of Fame ballot for not reaching the 5% minimum. Number 8, Toby HERR. A mostly forgotten player of the 70s and 80s, Toby HERR could do it all, at least at certain points in his career. He came up as a player without much power who could work a walk, but eventually decided to start going for the fences, and he smashed 27 bombs in 1977 while still leading the league with 109 walks. He was also good for around 20 steals a year for most of his career until he slowed down in the 80s. He did lots of little things right to help his team win ball games, but was never really recognized as a big-time star. Still, he retired with a 51.4 WAR, much better than most fans would expect out of Toby HERR if they had even heard of him in the first place. He retired less than 50 hits shy of 2,000 and had 195 career bombs. Number 7, Brett Butler. Coming in at number 7 is one of my favorite players during the late 80s, the speedy Brett Butler. He is so underrated that when I Google his name, all I get is this girl.
Oh, yeah, the actress.
Although he wasn't a power hitter and never really close to a big star, Brett Butler is the guy who gets rallies going, and he is the guy that scores the runs when you need it. He had a great eye at the plate, could work a walk, and could even bunt for a hit in order to get on base. And once on base, he was an instant threat to run and retired with 558 steals, 25th on the all-time list. He covered a ton of ground in center field, making all the routine plays and many spectacular ones as well. He hit at least 305 times in his career, yet made only 1 All-Star game, and has never been appreciated for how good he was. Despite retiring with 2,375 hits, he received just 2 votes on the Hall of Fame ballot. Number 6, John OLERUD. Whenever I think of John OLERUD, I remember that one defensive player who always wore a helmet on the field, and I had no idea why at the time, but it turns out that he had surgery in college for a brain aneurysm, which explains the helmet. Aside from that, however, he was quietly a fantastic player for about 15 years, ending his career with over 2,200 hits, 500 doubles, and 255 homers. He was also an elite defensive first baseman and got on base like nearly no one else, finishing his career with an on-base percentage just under 400. Because he wasn't a huge power hitter, he was even more overshadowed than someone like Carlos Delgado was during the steroid era. However, he did hit at least 20 home runs 5 times and retired with an impressive 58.2 WAR, which is better than many Hall of Famers, including Willie Stargell. Number 5, Willie Davis. Moving into the top 5, we have Willie Davis, a longtime Los Angeles Dodger whose prime came right in the middle of the pitcher's era of the 60s. He was so underrated after retiring that despite collecting over 2,500 hits over a 17-year career, he was not deemed good enough to even appear on a Hall of Fame ballot. Imagine having almost 3,000 career hits in the major leagues and not even getting your name on the ballot. Aside from hits, Davis was an elite defender and one of the fastest runners in the game, leading the league in triples twice and stealing 398 career bases. He took home 3 Gold Gloves, helped the Dodgers win 2 World Series, and stayed healthy throughout most of his career, nearly always playing in at least 140 games. Despite all of that, Davis got 0 Hall of Fame support, not even appearing on the ballot, and to this day continues to be unappreciated. Number 4, Jose Cruz.
Now the batter will be Jose Cruz. Cruz, one of the most underrated ball players in baseball.
Up next is a man named Jose Cruz who had to hit for years at the pitcher-friendly Astrodome. He was underrated even during his playing days, possibly because he was a late bloomer who had a few subpar years in St. Louis. But by the 80s, Cruz was a tough out, especially on the road, and he did it for years. In 1983, he led the league in hits. He hit at least 306 times and hit so well for so long that he accumulated 2,251 hits with a .284 batting average and .354 on-base percentage. He was also a solid defender despite winning 0 Gold Gloves. His 54.3 WAR is higher than several Hall of Famers, including Orlando Cepeda and Jim Rice. Had he played in a more hitter-friendly ballpark, there is no telling what kind of numbers Cruz could have put up, and it's very likely he would be a Hall of Famer today. Number 3, Willie Randolph. Although he may not come to mind as one of the all-time Yankee greats, Willie Randolph comes in 10th on the all-time WAR list for time spent with the New York Yankees, above A-Rod, Thurman Munson, Andy Pettitte, and Bernie Williams. All 9 players above Randolph are in the Hall of Fame. He had an incredible knack for getting on base, combined with speed and elite defense. Among second basemen, he has the 5th highest defensive WAR of all time, but never won a Gold Glove. In 1980, he drew a league-leading 119 walks and had an on-base percentage of .427. Randolph retired with 2,210 hits and an incredibly impressive .373 on-base percentage, 1 point higher than Kenny Lofton's. And his career WAR is tied with Hall of Famer Duke Snider and better than Willie McCovey and Jackie Robinson's. Yet, on the Hall of Fame ballot, Willie Randolph got an incredibly disrespectful 1.1% of the vote. Number 2, Tony Phillips. Is it possible to play 18 years in the big leagues, collect 2,000 hits, be one of the best defenders at your position, and not win a single award of any kind? Tony Phillips proves that the answer is yes. One of the best players to never make an all-star team, Tony Phillips was one of the most versatile players in the league with the ability to play elite defense almost anywhere on the field. He also had speed. He knew how to work a walk, a skill set that seems made for a list like this, and he even hit 160 career home runs, including 27 in 1995. Despite all he did to help his team win games, Phillips was underrated during and after his career, never receiving a single award. And since he never won a Gold Glove or even made an all-star team, it's no surprise that he got almost no support on the Hall of Fame ballot. Just one brave voter decided to check the box next to Tony Phillips' name. Number 1, Darrell Evans. Coming in as my number 1 underrated player of all time is going to be Darrell Evans, who had an extraordinary 21-year career, bringing massive power and elite defense to the field every day. He won 0 Gold Gloves, which can be attributed to playing in the same league at the same time as Mike Schmidt. And to no one's surprise, being on this list, he also had a great eye and worked a ton of walks. The difference with Evans as opposed to some of the other players, however, is that he worked walks and hit for massive power, smashing 414 career home runs. He has a 58.7 career WAR, a .361 on-base percentage, and averaged 25 homers and 20 doubles throughout his entire career. Somehow, despite all this, he made just 2 All-Star teams and got kicked off the Hall of Fame ballot after 1 year. This makes no sense, and in my mind, makes Darrell Evans the #1 underrated player, certainly of the modern era, and perhaps of all time. And that does it for this week's countdown. I hope you all enjoyed it. I put a lot of time, thought, and effort into this one. I understand there are dozens of other criminally underrated players. I considered many others, and I even started this as a top 10, but could not bear to leave some of these names off, so it ended up as a top 25. So I hope you all enjoyed it. Let me know any names I missed down below. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe button, and we will talk to you in the next video.